This is the Sports Bash Warm-Up with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Josh Hennig.
The pace of the game probably has something to do with that, too. He's very good at mixing things up. When they have the lead, he's not afraid to run the ball, but, he's also more short to medium-range passes.
That was Dave Weinberg yesterday talking about Doug Pederson and the Eagles' offense. Here on the warm-up on 97.3 ESPN. Text board is open as usual, 609-403-0973. Coming up today at 1:25, the man behind why we talked about Doug Pederson's offense yesterday. Doug Pederson, according to Mike Clay, ESPN NFL insider, Doug Pederson averages the most offensive snaps per game of all 32 play callers in the NFL. Clay went back 13 years to analyze every NFL offensive play caller data. And we'll get into all that with him coming up right here on the warm-up, 125 on 97.3 ESPN. And we asked Dave Weinberg about it a little bit yesterday because there's a lot of specific nuggets from the data that Mike Clay brought out. And I asked Dave, what does it say to you that Doug Pederson is among the highest in the NFL in snaps per game? I mean, you have a guy in Doug Pederson. And listen, wasn't the whole point of Chip Kelly's offense go, 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 get a lot of offensive snaps, get a lot of plays on the field? Well, it looks like that Doug Pederson does a better job than Chip Kelly does. Now, of course, also in that category with Doug Pederson with most offensive snaps per game is Josh McDaniels of the Patriots. And while Doug has had 3 different quarterbacks on the field in significant playing time over the last 4 years, they've only really had one aside from that one season. Tom Brady. Tom Brady's been the main quarterback in New England. Jimmy G played, 2-3 games. Jacoby Brissett played a couple games. Matt Castle had 1 year. But for the most part, the Patriots have had just Tom Brady over a very long period of time. So, and I asked Dave Weinberg about it. He said, look, I think there is something to be said for the pace of Doug Pederson's game. And I think sometimes when we look at the Eagles' offense, we don't appreciate what this Eagles franchise has done at times. And I'll get to the defense in just a minute because Dave Weinberg has some things about to say about the defense as well. But I think at times we don't appreciate how good the Eagles have been at taking lemons and making lemonade each and every year. You've heard me mention this stat numerous times over the years. The Philadelphia Eagles, 2 of the 4 years that Pederson and Carson Wentz have been in Philadelphia, have had some of the worst wide receiver play in the NFL. 2 of the 4 years, they have had a group of receivers who are top 5 in the NFL of most drops per target. That means you're throwing the ball to the guy and they can't catch it. Their one job is to catch the football, and they can't do it. But yeah, what happens? Carson Wentz has gone out there for 3 straight years now and only thrown 7 interceptions. Doug Pederson has won playoff games with not 1, but 2 different quarterbacks having to get him to the postseason, and it was Nick Foles, not Wentz, starting in those playoff games. He had to have another backup quarterback come in this past year, Josh McDaniel. And don't forget Wentz's rookie year when he went out with an injury at one point and Chase McDaniel had to come in. Or when Nick Foles got knocked out of the game temporarily and Nate Sudfeld had to come in. The Eagles have had this revolving door of quarterbacks, not just in the regular season, but the postseason. And yet Doug Pederson still finds a way to keep his team competitive and in the game. So you have to wonder. You have to give the guy credit. And I do wonder, though, why we don't sometimes give him credit throughout the year Because let's be realistic. Doug has had dudes. Just regular dudes out there. I mean, Deontay Burnett. That's a great receiver, let me tell you. Whoo! Robert Davis. I mean, that guy is going to the Hall of Fame, right? At least Eagles Ring of Honor. Yeah, right. Even when they had a speed receiver in 2017, it's not like Torrey Smith was among the best in the NFL. He was a legitimate speed threat, but he was closer to the end of his career than the beginning of his career at that point. He was still effective, but he wasn't breaking games. He wasn't ending games. He wasn't, consistently blowing the top off a defense. When was the last time Alshon Jeffrey actually wasn't injured? I'm serious. Even the year that they won the Super Bowl, remember he was playing injured that year. Eagles have had about 20 running backs come through here. I mean, remember one point it was Ryan Matthews years ago, and then the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they traded for Jay Ajayi when they already had Garrett Blount and Corey Clement, and they've had Jordan Howard, and they've had Josh Adams out there rushing for them at times. So they've had a ton of running backs. They've had inconsistent play at wide receiver, and yet Doug Pederson is still trying to maximize this offense with not one, not two, but 3 different quarterbacks who have started games for him. And I don't count the one game Nate Sudfeld started against the Cowboys. I'm not really throwing that in. Or am I supposed to make a big judgment off of that game? No. I mean games that matter, like playoff games and regular season games. So I don't think we give Pederson enough credit. I don't think that we appreciate the fact that this is an Eagles organization that has handed the coaching staff at times low caliber NFL players, and this organization has found ways to maximize them. Now, flip it over to the defense. Do we give the defense enough credit? Well, this is what Dave Weinberg said yesterday here on 97.3 ESPN about the defense giving Pederson those opportunities on offense.
I'm going to put a lot of credit on the defense for getting off the field and giving the offense more opportunities. I'm not surprised because, like I said, the defense is, they've had their troubles at times, but they're also very good at getting off the field and giving the ball back to Doug to work his magic on offense.
Not to sound like a 30 for 30 film, but what if I told you in the last 3 seasons that the Eagles defense has been top 6 in the NFL each year in holding opponents to the least amount of time on the field per offensive drive in the NFL. The year they won the Super Bowl, they were the 2nd best. In 2018, they were the 6th best. Last year, they were number 1 in the NFL in limiting opponents' time on the field per offensive possession. Is there something to the fact that while Doug Pederson has done a great job as a head coach and offensive play caller, that it's the Eagles' defense that has put him in position to have that success, to have that productivity? And now I'm going to irk all you Jim Schwartz haters. Why don't we give Jim Schwartz enough credit? Well, he doesn't act to look like Buddy Ryan, right? But yet Jim Schwartz has more playoff wins than Buddy Ryan has. See, one of the problems with all this is the Eagles, and we all know it, they've had, what it feels like, an innumerable amount of injuries over the last 4 years. It feels like every year there's a group of guys that are going to get injured. You're expecting someone to get injured, and when they do, you're just like, here we go again. Here we go again. And yet, while I mentioned Pederson is making lemonade out of lemons, Jim Schwartz is as well. And I'm not saying Jim Schwartz is the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, or he's, some great savant, or he's, this guy who is just so above and beyond everyone else. But as Dave Weinberg brought up yesterday as well, Schwartz does deserve credit as he's adjusted because of those injuries over the last couple of years.
I've been very impressed with the job he's done in the last 2 years because of the injuries that have decimated that defense, particularly in the secondary. I mean, for him to have to go with, Crevon LeBlanc and guys like that who were kind of on the street and have to plug them in and expect them to play major roles, I think that's a huge credit to Jim's ability to adapt and to adjust to what would have devastated a lot of other teams.
And there's a stat that plays that out because everybody wants to hear Eagles need a blitz. Eagles need more sacks, right? We've heard that a million times. Well, over the last 2 seasons, when the Eagles blitz the quarterback, opposing quarterbacks have a 100.9 quarterback rating against the Eagles blitz. When Jim Schwartz doesn't blitz, the quarterback rating is 89.05. That is a huge difference because the quarterback rating factors in completion percentage, turnovers, all kinds of variables in there. So should really the Eagles blitz or not? Well, if you believe that stat, it says that they shouldn't blitz as much. But what has Schwartz had to do? He's had to blitz more the last 2 years because of all the injuries, because of everybody and their cousin at some point getting injured. I mean, you thought you were going to have Malik Jackson last year. He gets injured. Darby was supposed to come in here and be a top-tier corner. He had trouble staying healthy. Avonte Maddox has basically played what it seems like every defensive back position at this point at some point because they've had somebody go out there and play. Jalen Mills has missed a bunch of time. We know that aside from Malcolm Jenkins and Fletcher Cox, almost everybody on this defense has been nicked up and hurt and has had to miss at least even a little bit amount of playing time, even in games. Malcolm Jenkins was the only player who played over 90% of snaps all of the last 4 years, and now he's gone. So there's a curious question. How does Jim Schwartz adjust there? Well, I assume he's going to. But the reason we need to give Schwartz credit is because he's actually done a better job than I think some people have given him credit for. And I'm not saying he's the best defensive coordinator in the NFL, but I think he's a lot better than people want to admit. Just because the Eagles don't have a gazillion sacks, and just because Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox are not among the league leaders in sacks, and just because they're not putting up these stats that people hold in higher regard than other numbers, doesn't make Schwartz and the defense any less effective. In the 4 years the Eagles have been here with the Doug Pederson era, Jim Schwartz has never had worse than 15th in points per game allowed. So that means even in a bad year, Jim Schwartz is allowing 22.1 points per game, which was last year. So is Schwartz really that bad of a defensive coordinator? No. And if he's putting Pederson in a position to get more opportunities on offense, if the defense is giving the Eagles more opportunities on offense to score and they're getting off the field, they're not allowing opponents to hold them on the field and wear out their defense, I think all in all they're doing their job. We all know the Eagles have one of the top 5 rush defenses in the last 3 years. That's been repeated time and time again. But did you also know the Eagles are top 10 in the NFL in not allowing first downs? In 2017, they were 5th best. 2018, they were 8th best. Last year, they were 5th best. So they're stopping opponents' run games. They're not allowing first downs. They're getting off the field more often than not. And on top of all of this, in the last 36 games in the regular season, the Eagles' defense is allowing 0.75 fourth quarter touchdowns per game. That's according to Pro Football Reference. So they're not allowing touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They're getting off the field. They're not allowing a bunch of rush yards or rushing touchdowns. They're not allowing teams to get first downs. What else do you want them to do? What else do you want Schwartz and this defense to do? Please tell me, 609-403-0973. Because I know there's, You people who hate Jim Schwartz and look at this Eagles defense and complain about it every year. I've heard you text into me. I've heard you text into Mike Gill. I've seen you text into Billy Schweim. I've seen you reach out to all the shows here on 97.3 ESPN. You all have all these reasons why Jim Schwartz stinks and needs to be fired and he's the worst guy in the world. Please, let me know. Where am I wrong? 609-403-0973. And one more from Dave Weinberg yesterday. He said that the NFC Championship game when the Eagles beat the Vikings is an example of what Jim Schwartz does best.
The NFC Championship game back in 2017 where things really weren't going their way against Minnesota, but then, Nolan Carroll has that pick six and it turns the whole game around. And I don't know if they go to the Super Bowl without that play. So it's, they always seem to have that habit, and that's a credit to Jim Schwartz. He always finds a way to put the guys in the right position to make plays. He does a great job of taking advantage of an individual player's talent. He doesn't ask them to do too much, and seems to do a good job of recognizing what they're best at and utilizing that.
When the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I think we all would agree that Patrick Pederson was probably their best cornerback, and he was a slot corner. He was arguably their best cornerback that year. Their best defensive back over the last couple of years in terms of consistency might be Avonte Maddox. And like I said earlier, he's probably played almost every defensive back position. You won the Super Bowl without Jordan Hicks. What else do you want from this guy? Again, I'm not saying he's the greatest of all time, but what I am saying is at some point, I think we just need to give Schwartz a little bit of credit. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Nick from Brigantine chimes in and says, I think Pederson with Schwartz can give Andy Reid a run for his money for being the best coaches in the NFL. Belichick doesn't count. He had Brady. That's Nick from Brigantine. Well, there's a couple of different points there. First of all, the reason why Andy is considered by most to be at least the second best coach in the league is because he's done it for a period of time that outlasts almost everybody. There's only a handful of coaches that have coached as long as Andy Reid has, and one of them is Belichick. Even Pete Carroll's only been in Seattle for just over 10 years. Mike Tomlin, just over 10 years as well. Reid, between Philadelphia and Kansas City, has coached for almost 20 years at this point. I think his upcoming year actually would be his 20th year. So Andy Reid is one of the best coaches in the NFL partly because his longevity plus his success has equaled something to be respected and admired. And let's not forget about the fact that Andy Reid has found some diamonds in the rough. Not everybody loved the pick of Donovan McNabb. And arguably McNabb is the best quarterback in Eagles franchise history. Pat Mahomes was not the first quarterback draft. The Chiefs had to trade up to get him. There were a lot of questions about him coming out of college. And look at him now. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. He's a league MVP and a Super Bowl champion. Andy Reid has also done a good job at evaluating talent and putting them in positions to be successful. I don't think a lot of people knew who Brian Westbrook was before the Eagles drafted him. I mean, he didn't even go to a SEC, Pac-12, Big 12 school. He went to Villanova. That's not even FBS. That's the next level down in college. And look what Brian Westbrook did. I think Andy, the reason why he is up there is because of the longevity of everything he's done. Now, I think Pederson has to be at least considered in that 5 to 10 range of best coaches in the NFL for sure. And I think you cannot talk about Pederson's success without Schwartz's success of helping him get to those levels. So I do agree with that. But let's hold off on the Andy Reid Pederson run for their money until we see Doug do it for more than 40 years. Like I said, Andy's got about 2 decades here. Doug's got 4 years. Let's see Doug do it for another 40 years, and then I'm willing to have that conversation, Nick from Brigantine. But I do like where your mind's going. I like the fact that you lumped Pederson with Schwartz because there is importance to having a good offensive and defensive complement. Andy Reid had issues when Jim Johnson wasn't there in Philadelphia. They used Sean McDermott as a scapegoat. They shoved Juan Castillo to the defense. The dream team was a failure. And there have been years in Kansas City where Andy Reid has had some pretty poor defenses. That's part of the reason why they brought in Steve Spagnuolo, was because the last couple of years of the previous D coordinator, the defense was poor. They were giving up a lot of points and a lot of yards. And when you give up a lot of points and you give up a lot of yards, you're taking away time away from Andy Reid's offense. Now, you mentioned Belichick, Nick Fabricati. You mentioned don't count because he had Brady. Well, what are we supposed to say about Bill Walsh then? Is Bill Walsh less of a coach because he had Joe Montana? Am I supposed to sit here that Chuck Noll was less of a legend because he had all those Hall of Famers on offense and defense? I mean, there was, 14 Hall of Famers at one point on the Steelers when they were winning the Super Bowls? It was ridiculous. So is Chuck Noll less of a coach? I think this idea that Belichick didn't have success without Brady is very unfair because it was Belichick who was coaching those giant defenses in the 80s. It was Belichick who Parcells brought in to help him with the Patriots in the mid-90s. And Belichick took a miserable Browns fan franchise and got them to the playoffs. And the Patriots had, 10, 11 wins with Matt Castle at quarterback, and they missed the playoffs. So this idea that Belichick wouldn't have success without Brady, I don't think is fair, because name me a head coach whose name is not Joe Gibbs, who has won a lot of games with multiple quarterbacks and players shuffling in another roster. I say don't bring up Joe Gibbs because Joe Gibbs, yes, I know, he won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. We all know the story. But that's the exception to the rule. That's not the rule. Dan from EHT chimes in, 609-403-0973. He says, okay, whatever with Schwartz. He's good, not great. Schwartz was great in the championship game, but the Super Bowl was pathetic, except the one play by Graham. Under Pederson, there hasn't been a great defensive player drafted. Okay, well, those are 2 different issues, Dan from EHT. First of all, I'll just address this real quick. You had all those yards scored on your Super Bowl against Tom Brady in a very good Patriots offense. So is that Brady being great, or is that Schwartz having a bad game plan? I happen to lean toward Brady being great because he's been a great quarterback. You mentioned defensive players drafted. Whose fault is that, though? I don't think that's Schwartz's fault. I don't even know if that's fully Doug's fault. I know Doug has input on the draft, but wouldn't that be a front office issue? And for all of you people out there who love Joe Douglas, so Joe Douglas was given Howie the list of guys to draft, and if Howie wasn't drafting the right defensive guys, then is it Howie's fault? Is it Joe Douglas's fault? There's a lot of blame to be pushed around here when it comes to some of the Eagles' strengths and weaknesses. We'll get back to your text messages just a little bit later, 609-403-0973. But coming up next, the man behind the article we've been discussing, Mike Clay, ESPN NFL Insider, joins us next right here on the warm-up. Josh Hennig hanging out with you, 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Welcome back into the warm-up. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. We'll get back to text in just a bit, 609-403-0973. Right now, joining me on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, incredible analysis, ESPN Plus article by Mike Clay, the play calling tendencies for every one of the 32 play callers in the NFL. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Mike, how you doing on this Thursday?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. And first of all, I love the article. I love the analysis. You always do a great job. But there was one thing that just stuck out to me, and I never would have expected this. I never would have thought of this. Most offensive snap counts per game. Most offensive snaps per game. Doug Pederson is one of the 3 guys on that list, which would surprise a lot of people here in Philadelphia because it was Chip Kelly who was supposed to be the guy with, go, go, go. But yet it's Doug Pederson, the guy who came after him, who's out there seemingly getting the most offensive snaps and opportunities for the Philadelphia organization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's kind of interesting. And we saw this with Chip Kelly, and we kind of saw it with Cliff Kingsbury last season, where these guys come in, they want to run a lot of plays. But here's the thing. If you go 3 and out, all you're doing is putting pressure on your defense by going fast, right? And we saw that during the Chip Kelly era, and we saw that with Arizona last season. You really have to execute for it to work. And I think the Eagles have done pretty well. Obviously, they've been above average offensively for the most part throughout his time with the team. And, that high volume has paid off for the quarterback counting stats and certainly the running back position and the tight end position as well. Maybe not wide receivers. We know we've had some problems there, but it has allowed plenty of volume for the offense. And honestly, that will take some pressure off the defense.
Now, while Pederson has the high volume, his mentor is not one of the three you have here, the most offensive snaps per game. Andy has a little bit less volume than Doug. So what in your eyes has been the difference that Doug has done with his offense that differs from Andy?
Yeah, well, recently it's just been obscene, off the charts, unsustainable efficiency, right? I mean, when you're just scoring at will with long throws and you're super pass heavy, that's going to lead to fewer plays. But as long as it's working, you're going to score a lot of points. And we've seen that with Patrick Mahomes, and we saw it during the tail end of the Alex Smith era. We saw it in his prime with Philadelphia, obviously, with Donovan McNabb. But that's part of it. And also, keep in mind that Doug Pederson has basically run a balanced offense over the past few seasons, whereas Andy Reid has always been, with very few exceptions, been extremely pass-heavy. And that has essentially peaked out the past couple of seasons. He has Patrick Mahomes, so why bother running the football? We know we've learned over the past decade or so, with so many smart minds, so many analytical minds studying the game, that teams need to be throwing the ball more. At this point, it's essentially common sense. And we've seen that from Bill Belichick. That's been his calling card with Josh McDaniels up there in New England. They've been pass heavy throughout his entire tenure. And we've seen that with Andy Reid and some play callers who have athletic quarterbacks like Baltimore, for example, will lean on the run. We've seen that. There's always going to be some exceptions, but the calling card for an offense should be passing, and we've really seen Andy Reid with Patrick Mahomes kind of peak in that area. So again, if you're throwing more, it's going to lead to fewer plays, especially if you're at an extremely high level of efficiency.
Now, you mentioned the running backs, so that leads me to asking you then about Miles Sanders. Second year in the offense. There's some people who think that he can be similar to what LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook were for the Eagles years ago. Do you think Miles Sanders can do that kind of production in this Doug Pederson offense?
I do. If you look at Doug Pederson's 4 offensive units, since been a play caller in the NFL, it's been with Philadelphia. All 4 running back units have been above average in carries, pass routes, touches, yardage, touchdowns, and even fantasy points if you play fantasy. So all of them have been very generous to that position, and that would kind of align again with Andy Reid's offenses, because as we know, they were very generous to that position in terms of volume and efficiency. So yeah, I think it sets it very nicely for Sanders, especially as the depth chart is currently constructed. We have to keep an eye on what they do, because we know that they were in the market for another running back. Carlos Hyde, obviously, is the top of the list. He's gone. Boston Scott is going to be involved. There's no way after that last month of the season he's going to be a non-factor. I think that he'll be pretty involved in passing situations and as a change of pace back. But all in all, we know Sanders is going to see a larger share of the touches this season, and it's really his chance to flourish in this offense. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does.
Mike Clay joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Make sure you're following him on Twitter at Mike Clay, NFL, ESPN, NFL Insider. This very thorough investigation of the play callers in the NFL. Another point you brought up in the article was Doug Pederson, his mentor Andy Reid, and former Eagles offense coordinator Frank Reich all have something in common, I noticed, which is they all get the tight end a lot of targets. But that leads me to this question. How much of it is the talent at tight end, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce, et cetera, versus this is the scheme? So is it the talent, they're getting the talent involved, or is it the scheme that allows the talent to flourish?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think smart play callers are going to use the talent they have at hand, but sometimes you'll see people force it, certainly. So that's definitely a factor. Reich has, we've seen it for a long time from him. It's not just with the Colts, right? He was with the Chargers, and I know he had some gates there, and I believe Hunter Henry maybe for a season or so there. But with the Colts, I mean, you're talking a career year from Eric Ebron, right? You're talking about Jack Doyle. So, he's really prioritized that position. He's used multiple tight end sets, and he has relied on that position pretty heavily. So I think it's more than that. I definitely think it's scheme related. You could definitely say that about Philadelphia as well. Again, I know that Dallas Goedert has probably been targeted more than they expected because of the wide receiver injuries, but he still plays a lot, right? And they drafted him in the second round. So obviously it's a priority position for them. And then Andy Reid, I mean, yes, he's had Travis Kelce, but, we saw a guy like Chad Lewis, as a playmaker at times, and Brent Stellick obviously peaked with Andy Reid. So, he's found a way to make plenty use of that position as well. With Andy, it might be a little bit more personnel driven because he's had Travis Kelce, at least over the past few seasons in Kansas City. But I think all of the guys kind of have it in their blood, right, to use that position pretty extensively.
I wonder then, is the tight end more important for offensive efficiency and productivity than maybe we give credit for? Because everyone loves the big-time receiver, right? Julio Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, whether you're a fantasy guy or a straight football guy, you always look at the wide receiver, but do we sometimes undervalue the importance of the tight end then for a high-powered, efficient offense?
I think that it's really, it's a cop-out answer, but it depends how good the player is, right? Again, I think if you have, a really good tight end, you have to find a way to maximize them. And if you have two and you're not very good at the wide receiver position, then you have to find a way to make them a big part of your offense. And, you've seen that. You're going to see that in Tampa Bay this season. Obviously, Philadelphia was forced to do that with the wide receiver injuries last season. We saw it in Minnesota, who they barely had a third wide receiver on the field last season. They were rolling with the multiple tight end sets. So, again, it depends on your personnel. Are you better off going with two tight ends and three receivers when throwing? I don't think so. The efficiency stats aren't going to align with that. And you're going to see most play callers prefer to use that receiver. In fact, how often do you hear during the offseason, well, this team's going to use more two tight end sets. This team's going to use more two running back sets. We hear that one all the time. And it pretty much doesn't happen. Still 60 to 70% of the time, if not more, teams are going to have three wide receivers on the field, especially when they're throwing the football. So I think that's the way teams would prefer to go. But at the same time, having a versatile two-way tight end guy that can block and catch the football is a huge asset in the NFL. So, again, it depends on the player, but definitely an important position.
Now, we spent time talking about the offense, but I'm curious about the defense's impact on some of these numbers, because you have to wonder if the Eagles' defense, which I double-checked this on Pro Football Reference, it says that the Eagles' defense has been among the best in the NFL in time on the field. They're getting opponents off the field. So is there a factor of the Eagles' defensive success in getting Doug Pederson, the Eagles' offense, more opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's certainly reasonable. You still have to get first downs and move the chains to keep the offense on the field, but definitely having a great defense is going to take pressure off an offense. I mean, that's just it's almost like saying you say the opposite, right? A great quarterback is a good defensive player, right? Because it's going to keep the defense out of tough situations. There's really no question about that. But if you look at last season, the Eagles defense faced 60 snaps a game, and that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. And by the way, that was fifth fewest in the NFL, right? So the offense was on the field a lot. The defense was not on the field facing a lot of plays, and the two can certainly go hand in hand. The Eagles defense has been pretty good, aside of maybe the quarterback position against the perimeter. It's been pretty good, especially against the run during the Pederson era. So I think they go hand in hand, right? You just both units work together, and they can help each other out. There's no question about that.
Now, another offensive play call on your list, and again, I highly recommend everyone read this ESPN Plus article. You got to get ESPN Plus because this insider information is just incredible. Greg Roman, we know about Lamar Jackson last year, in the last couple of years, but what has, in your eyes, been the differences or similarities between what Roman did with the 49ers versus Baltimore versus his short time in Buffalo? Is there a lot of consistency, a lot of variation? What is your analysis showed you? Because you have 98 games called for Greg Roman. That's a huge sample size.
Yeah, it's been all the same. I mean, it's not often we find this, but he is a coordinator with a clear mission, a clear scheme that doesn't really change. And it's having a quarterback who can run the football, right? We've seen that time and time again, whether it was Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco during his time with Buffalo, and now with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. They've found the personnel to fit his offense, and they've made pretty good use of it. It's been effective. Obviously, you don't see a lot of passing volume from his offense. He's never actually, his last 5 offenses have been 25th or lower in pass attempts, but you see the quarterbacks that have been no lower than 5th in carries and rushing yards during that span. So, again, a lot of times you'll see these guys, based on the personnel they have, kind of bounce all over the place in certain categories. We've seen pretty clear consistency from Greg Roman, and it's going to be interesting if he gets a head coaching job at some point. And if they have another great offensive year there in Baltimore, you would kind of expect that. In fact, I'm kind of surprised he didn't get one this past offseason. It's going to be interesting to see if he finds a new home as a head coach and brings a more versatile quarterback in that can run the ball and throw it.
And speaking of Roman and his offenses, you mentioned the 3 different stops. Obviously 98 games is a huge sample size. You mentioned in the article also about the tight ends, about how he didn't always use the tight end the same way from stop to stop. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about how sometimes the talent can dictate that usage. But we know in Baltimore they were using 3 different guys. So is it that Roman has evolved in maybe his view of the tight end?
I think that's personnel-based for him, right? So you look at his early time, his first years as a playmaker with the 49ers, and I believe there might have been a little bit of, I believe there was some Vernon Davis off the top of my head mixed in there, and you had in 2011, his tight ends were 8th in targets, and then they were outside the top 15 in targets the next 4 seasons as he wound down in San Francisco and then moved on to Buffalo for a season and then 2 more games in 2016. And then he comes to Baltimore and has Mark Andrews, and he has, Lamar Jackson under center. Obviously, they wanted to run the football and go heavy on sets. They were weak at wide receiver last season. We know that. And they just went super heavy with Hayden Hurst, who was a first-round pick. They traded him in the offseason. Nick Boyle, they like him as a blocker. And obviously, Mark Andrews was a gem find the year they drafted Hurst. So I think that, again, was just adapting to your personnel. Super young, kind of a weak, let's be honest, wide receiver room, but loaded with tight end talent, running offense. It kind of made sense to go that direction.
Mike, when you went through all 32 of these play callers, was there anyone's results or anything that stood out to you? Like maybe, someone that surprised you or something that said, oh, well, I didn't realize that, or that explains that kind of thing?
I think that happened pretty much throughout the entire article, nonstop. There were some things we knew, had an idea of, and then it kind of really jumps out at you. But it was interesting to kind of go through and see who has called plays, who has not called plays. And I should give a shout out to our ESPN NFL Nation team, because I could not have done this without them. I kind of set up a chart, gave my idea who I thought was calling the plays. They kind of went through week by week and charted who was the play caller that week. And then I applied it to all our data. And now I have so much data, I don't even know what to do with it. So I'm looking forward to putting it to use going forward. But I'll give you one super interesting nugget because it's kind of insane. And that would do with Adam Gase, right? The Jets head coach, now former Dolphins head coach. We know he's a playmaker or a play caller for the Bears under John Fox. He also was the play caller for Peyton Manning during his peak years there in Denver. Now his production really hasn't been good since those Peyton Manning days. But what really jumps out about him is that he does not run the ball at the goal line. So over the past 3 seasons, his running backs have a total of 11 carries inside the opponent's 5-yard line. That's over 3 seasons. And for perspective, last season alone, 11 players had more than that in the NFL. 11 players at 12 or plus. He is 11 over the past 3 seasons. So it's nuggets like that I came across that just kind of blew my mind. And, if you play fantasy, maybe that pushes you away from a guy like Le'Veon Bell. So that's why we kind of do this research.
That's insane. Adam Gase, what the heck's going on with that guy? All right, Mike, I really appreciate your time. Again, the article is on ESPN+. You have a couple articles, actually. The one that breaks down the play callers and then one that breaks down the fantasy impact, but it's all on ESPN Plus. I highly recommend everyone jump on it. Mike Clay, follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. As all guests, he joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, thanks again for the time and incredible work here, man. Thank you very much. Anytime. Have a good one. You too. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN. Back to your text messages next. 609-403-0973 right here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City. Final segment here on the warm-up 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you for one more segment leading up to the Sports Bash. Mike Gill, Hunter Brody. Jam-packed show. Jared Diamond, Wall Street Journal baseball writer, coming up at 2:30 Thursdays with D-Ray. Darryl Ray joins the guys at 3 o'clock. Football at 4. Adam Kaplan, NFL insider, in today. And, of course, the MGPT Top 5 at 5. All coming up on the Sports Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Right now, back to your text, 609-403-0973. Joey D. in Ventnor chiming me and says, I'm a huge, he's got 3 U's here, so I'm assuming it's huge. Huge. I'm a huge Schwartz fan, he says. Eagles would be in a world of trouble without him, with weak personnel he's had. I'm just not a fan of the sticks play defense on 3rd and long. That's Joey D. from Ventnor. Joey, it's funny you mentioned the, guarding the sticks play on defense, because there's a lot of coaches who do play that defense. The prevent defense has been around for a very long time. So it's not just Jim Schwartz. There's a lot of coaches who run that defense for various reasons in various situations and with varying degrees of success. It's not always bad. It's not always good. It's subjective. I think the prevent sticks defense is one of those things where it just depends on the situation. Like you heard Mike Clay mention about tight ends, that sometimes the tight end will dictate, the personnel will dictate how you run an offense. Well, I think that the situation on 3rd down should also dictate how you run your defense. There's not one perfect way to run on 3rd down every single play. So I'm not going to hold against Schwartz that Titans game, for example, okay? Did we all agree with the Titans game defense? No, of course we didn't. But it's not like the players helped. Malcolm Jenkins could have made a play call on the back end to get them out of a couple situations. I know that Graham played way too far off the line. At one point, he had to run up, and it was too late. There are situations, Corey Graham talking about, there are situations where if you go back and rewatch that Titans game, for example, when the Eagles lost, I can make the argument that was less about Schwartz's play calling than it was about the players executing on the field. And I know it's not sexy to blame the players. Everybody loves to blame the coach. But let's be realistic. Malcolm Jenkins wasn't infallible, and that was a game that was an example of it. Malcolm Jenkins could have made some adjustments on the back end, whether it was the 3rd and long play or the end zone where they finally scored. Malcolm could have made some adjustments. He could have made some observations that would have helped his teammates be in a better position to be successful. So I get what you're saying, Joey D. Listen, you're not a fan of that style, but can't always blame Schwartz for that. Sometimes the players want to execute. Schwartz can make the best play call in the world, but the players can't execute, then it doesn't matter. How do we know that Schwartz isn't out there, with, an A+ game plan, but his players are playing a B- game? Just a thought. 609-403-0973. Dan from EHC brought up a point earlier that I thought was interesting. A little bit earlier, he said, there's a serious concern when it comes to the injuries with the Eagles. Why? The numbers don't add up. It's like Brandon Brooks training and he gets injured. There has to be something with the Eagles training regimen. It can't just be bad luck. Now, I would say that one of the questions I have, Dan from EHT, is it the training staff or is it the medical staff? Like where do we place some of that blame? Because the trainer might be working somebody out, but the rehab department may be having him doing something else. Are they all in sync? Is there some overlap going on? Is there some, counterproductive advice being given to the guys? I'm no medical expert, but as someone who's had a personal trainer certification, I know that there have been times what I'm taught to get my certification, which I ended up with 4 certs, which obviously didn't do me a great deal in my outside of radio life because I'm still here. But listen, everything I learned in those training courses with all my certifications, some of the stuff is directly counter to what they tell you medically for certain things. There are things that you'll learn in these courses that don't line up with everything that you learn in rehab. So if you've ever been injured and had to go through rehab and then you go through these, training courses, they're not lining up. There's some overlap in terms of conflicting opinions. So is that maybe the issue, Danny HC, that's going on? Is there maybe an issue where the Eagles training department is not giving the same advice as the medical department, and there's overlapping, and maybe that's what's causing some of the issues? Not saying it's 100% the reason. I'm just saying it's a possibility. I think sometimes things happen that are totally outside of our view sometimes. 609-403-0973. Got a text from Phil in Wildwood. Phil, good to hear you chiming in here. Phil says, I was at the Titans game in Tennessee. Phil says, it was the hottest game I've ever been to, and the Eagles sideline was in the sun the entire game. They were exhausted by the end. That's Phil from Wildwood. All right, so if the Eagles were exhausted, then it makes it even more obvious that was an odd situation. That the Eagles' trouble of stopping the Titans at the end of that game maybe had nothing to do with Schwartz. It just had to do with the guys who were just burnt out. They were exhausted. They were drained, possibly. Phil from Wildwood says they were exhausted. He was at the game. How many times have you heard on a broadcast, so-and-so's sideline's been in the sun the whole entire game? I wonder how that's affecting them. Sometimes some of these teams, they purposely put the opposing sideline in the line of the sun, and they put themselves in the shade. A little home field advantage, a little home cooking in terms of where they're placed on the field. Phil brings up an interesting point. Maybe that Tennessee game was an anomaly. Maybe the Eagles usually are not that exhausted. Phil from Wildwood, good to hear from you. Good point there, man. I like the little I was there experience. There's always some value to saying you were there in your observations. I like that. One more text in here says, you act like Jim Schwartz has players from Egg Harbor Township High School. He has NFL players. Don't make excuses of the talent. I'm not making excuses of the talent. But I'm saying that sometimes the talent doesn't always do the job they were told to do. It's always a possibility. You tell a guy to go on a rush and he decides to make a last second I know better than the coach decision, and then the whole play blows up and he's to blame for it. Happens. Coming up next, Mike Gill, Hunter Brody, Sports Bash, jam-packed show. Don't miss it right here, 97.3 ESPN.